I thought I should provide an update on how I'm getting on with my Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. I've owned it since November 2022, so that's about 9 months, and it's currently done about 1,600 miles. In conclusion, I suppose, I'm still loving it. It's a really great bike. There's lots to love about this bike, I think. The performance is great. I think really the performance belies the numbers. It's 94 horsepower and I think 64 pounds-foot of torque, but it feels plenty fast enough for road use. It's got loads of mid-range grunt. Certainly overtaking on it is absolutely no problem at all. I'm particularly impressed by the grip and handling, particularly given that it is the Rally Pro version, so it's got the 21-inch front wheel, so it's no sports bike, but it does handle extremely well. It's actually quite a lot of fun to ride. Certainly, because the bike is quite tall, the bars are quite wide, certainly tipping it into bends, it goes in really, really nicely. It holds its line. It's got plenty of grip. I think it's extremely nice bike to actually ride, and even in a spirited manner. Fuel economy on the bike seems to be pretty good. Overall, in my ownership, it's been averaging about 58 miles per gallon, but the last tank I ran through it averaged 62 miles per gallon. That's per UK gallon. So fuel economy does seem to be improving as the mileage increases on the bike. So what about any gripes that I have now I've had the opportunity to live with the bike for a while? I mean, no bike is perfect after all. The things that I suppose bug me slightly on the bike is the speedo, which is fairly inaccurate, to be honest. It overreads, which is better than underreading at least, but it does overread by quite a lot. On average, I think about 10%. So an indicated 77 would be a real 70 when I compare it back to the GPS. Other gripes, I would say the tacho display on the TFT screen is impossible to read at a glance. There's a lot of customization available on the TFT screen layouts. You've got 4 different types of screen layout that you can scroll and choose between, but none of them frankly have a tacho display that actually makes it easy to read. So I don't know quite what Triumph were thinking when they came up with how they wanted to display the tacho. It's not the end of the world really. I don't really rely on tachos for gear changing. That's more a sort of a sound and feel type arrangement where I change gear, but you know, it would be nice to be able to just glance down at the tacho and know exactly where you were, how close you were to the red line, etc. So I certainly, the display on the TFT display on my previous Speed Triple was much better in that regard, and that display also seems to be shared with the Tiger 1200, so maybe if there's a facelift of the 900, that might be something that Triumph will move to that display, because it certainly is a better option than the current 900 display. Vibes from the engine, as I've lived with the bike for a while, these have become more sort of noticeable to me. I mean, it's not a major problem. I think really they're only particularly noticeable if you're cruising above about 80 miles per hour. You can feel it through the bars and the pegs, nothing through the seat. It's not excessive, but it is noticeable. But if you are cruising at sort of 80 miles an hour plus, then you can just use the cruise control, which gives you the opportunity to lessen your grip on the throttle, which actually makes it more tolerable. But no, it's definitely noticeable on this bike, but as I say, for me it doesn't particularly bother me, but it is certainly something to be aware of. The weight of the bike, I estimate that it probably weighs about 230 kilograms when it's fully fueled. that's not excessive. In fact, that's pretty good for an adventure type bike. But the weight does feel quite high up, so it does make the bike. It's certainly no problem when you're riding the bike, when you're on the bike. But certainly, if you're trying to manoeuvre it around, wheeling it around the garage, etc., then it does feel top heavy, and you've got to take a bit of care about doing that. Reality, at about 230 kilograms, it probably doesn't weigh a great deal more than my other bike, which is the Speed Twin 1200. And similarly, previously I had a Yamaha FZ1 Phaser, which again, that would have weighed about 230 kilos with fuel. But with both the Speed Twin and the Phaser, wheeling them around, manoeuvring them around the garage, that sort of thing, absolutely no problem at all. But with the Tiger, it definitely feels more weighty. You need to take more care when sort of wheeling this around. It's also, because it is quite tall, there's quite a long reach with your legs, frankly, when you come to a stop. So you've got to be aware of that. I find it's always something you have to think about, which again, when riding the Speed Twin, for example, you don't really think about it at all. It's just all very easy. I'm 6 feet tall and I've got a 32-inch inside leg, so I find even with the seat on its lower setting, which is 860 millimeters, I can't quite flat foot it. I can get the balls of my feet down on the ground, but so you do need to consider that. If you're shorter than that, then yeah, you will need to think about those sort of things. In terms of specific problems I've had with the bike, on delivery, the only apparent problem was the fact that I couldn't get the My Triumph app to connect to the bike. I suspected that was a problem with the information being programmed into the bike, so there wasn't a lot I could do about that. So I told the dealer about it and sort of said to him it wasn't something that I particularly wanted to make a special visit to come and sort that out, so I was happy to leave that until the first service was done. So that problem was corrected at the first service, and it did indeed turn out that the problem was that the bike's VIN chassis number hadn't been programmed incorrectly into the Bluetooth module in the bike. So once that was done, I went back to the My Triumph app on my phone, and that immediately connected to the bike, so that was absolutely fine. Does mean that I now have access to the turn-by-turn navigation on the bike, which works quite well. I mean, I pretty much always use my phone anyway on the bike for navigation, either using Google Maps or using the TomTom Rider app on the phone, which I also find is extremely good. So I would use that at a preference anyway, but it's always nice to have the backup and the simplicity really of just having the turn-by-turn stuff appear on the TFT screen rather than having to attach the separate phone to the bike if either, if you've forgotten something or you just can't be bothered to do all that. The only other problem that I've come across on the bike, and this is very much an intermittent problem, is engine cutting out. It always happens under the same circumstances. Basically, if you're slowing down, planning to come to a stop at a road junction or set of traffic lights, whatever, as you're slowing down, you're changing down through the gears, and when you finally come to a halt and you pull the clutch in to come to a complete stop, at the moment you pull the clutch in, the engine just cuts out. Doesn't always do that. In fact, it's only done it on 2 occasions out of the many times I've ridden it, so it's certainly not a common occurrence, but it's something that need to be aware that it might happen. The bike will always instantly restart if you just hit the starter button, and then strangely it doesn't do it again on that particular ride. So, and it always does it fairly early on in the ride. So if you're leaving home from cold and it doesn't do it at the first junction or the second junction or whatever, but by the time you've been going for 5 minutes and you come to a halt, it might do it. So if you're just coming to a halt, it's not an issue, because, well, firstly now I'm expecting it anyway, but you just hit the starter button and it'll instantly fire up again. But that's certainly an issue that I'll be getting the dealer to look at when it goes in for its annual service. At the moment, it's not a common problem, so it's not something that I feel the need to make a special trip to the dealer to get sorted out. Regarding the tyres on the bike, it comes fitted with the Bridgestone Battle Axe A41 tyres. These are I suppose the entry-level adventure tyres from Bridgestone. They'd be classed as a 90% road, 10% off-road type tyre, I guess. And they work extremely well on the road. I've no complaints about them whatsoever. For tarmac use, they offer plenty of grip, they're quiet. Obviously, I've only done about 1,600 miles, so I don't know how they're going to wear. But for on-road use, absolutely no problems at all. I think, though, that when the time comes to change the tyres, I'll probably want to go for something that is a little more off-road focused as well, given the nature of the bike, it being the Rally Pro version. I think I'd probably want to go for something that is more of an 80-20, off 80% on-road, 20% off-road tyres. So something that will give a bit more off-road purchase, because certainly the tyres that it's currently got on it would be pretty hopeless off-road, I think. So the option on the 80-20 type tyres, I think, is, again, Bridgestone do an AT41, which is their sort of next step up. There's also the Michelin Anarchy Adventure tyre, and the other option is probably the Continental TKC 70 tyre. These are all 80-20 tyres. You can go up to 50-50 tyres, but I think they're far too aggressive for my use, at least, because vast majority of my use is going to be on-road rather than off-road. So the tyres I have on the bike, I'd always want them to be primarily a road tyre. I wouldn't want to compromise the on-road handling of the bike so that I could have really great off-road grip, because off-road isn't something I'm ever going to do to any serious extent. What I would like to do, though, is take some of or be able to explore some of the local fairly mild byways, byways open to all traffic type roads on the bike. But before I do that, I think it would need better tyres, slightly more off-road focus, so that'll have to wait a while. But I'm certainly not going to replace the existing A41 tyres while they've still got loads of life left in them. I mean, they're quite an expensive tyre to start with, and they do handle great on the road, so that'll have to wait until tyres actually need replacing before I do that. If I'm going to compare the Tiger to my other bike, the Speed Twin, I think that certainly if I just wanted to go out for a ride on a sunny evening or a Sunday morning or something like that, I'd pretty much always choose the Speed Twin, if I'm honest. The Speed Twin is just such a fun bike to ride. Weight-wise, they're pretty similar, but the Speed Twin it's a physically smaller machine. It has 99 horsepower, 83 pounds-foot of torque. Also, the horsepower between the Speed Twin and the Tiger are fairly similar, but certainly the extra torque of the Speed Twin is noticeable. It really is a rapid bike, and it's so much fun to ride. If, however, I actually wanted to do some distance, or I knew I was going to have to go cruising up dual carriageway motorway at some speed, that sort of thing, then absolutely I'd take the Tiger every time. It's a much better bike for doing that. Your visibility on the Tiger is extremely good. Because it's quite a tall bike, you do get a really good view of the road ahead. It's tall enough you can see over the top of cars in front of you, you can see over verges on the side of the road, that sort of thing. Gives you great visibility. It's got, with the screen, I find the standard screen on the Tiger is extremely good. I feel no need to get any kind of aftermarket screen on it. I think the wind protection you get from that, for me at least, is completely adequate. Quite happy with that. So I think really, I'm really pleased with both the Tiger and the Speed Twin. They both serve their own purpose, and they both do a very different job. So in conclusion, I think on the Tiger, I really am very pleased with it. It's been a great purchase, and it's a really nice bike to ride. Performance on it is is more than adequate for me. Fuel economy is pretty good, averaging about 60 miles per gallon. Can't complain at that. It's a comfortable bike. It's got lots of toys. It's got heated seats. It's got heated grips. It's got cruise control. It's really got everything you need if you need to do any kind of distance on a bike. It's comfortable. The riding position is nice. The seat seems pretty comfy. So for that sort of use, I think the Tiger is absolutely ideal. So yeah, very pleased with the purchase on that. So plans for the future. I quite fancy adding a third bike to the collection. I'm interested in getting a smaller, lighter bike for some mild off-roading, green lanes, byways, that sort of thing. Not serious off-road use, but just a bit of more countryside exploring. Sort of use where the Tiger 900 is a bit too big and heavy for that sort of use, really. So bike that I'm pretty interested in is the upcoming Triumph Scrambler 400X, but that won't be available in the UK until probably early next year. So I'll want to test ride one of them, I think, when it becomes available for sure, just to see what I like, see whether I like it or not. Other bikes in that category, I suppose, that I have considered also is the Fantic Caballero Scrambler 500. Seems like quite a good option, although that's reasonably expensive. And there's also the Royal Enfield Scram 411, which is certainly extremely good value. But I think it really all depends on what price Triumph decide to put on the Scrambler 400X before making any decision on that. So that's most likely going to be something that I'll be looking into early next year to actually do that. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. So I think that really concludes my update on how I'm getting on with my Triumph Tiger 900 Rally Pro. So thanks very much for watching. Bye for now.